Picture this. The year is 241 BC. Rome has just won its first epic clash with the mighty Carthaginian Empire. But as the legions march home through the gates of the Eternal City, there are no triumph parades, no cheering crowds. Instead, the streets are filled with widows clutching fatherless children. Veterans hobble on wooden legs, their faces scarred by salt water and Carthaginian bronze. The treasury, empty. The people, starving. The Republic, bankrupt. How did Rome emerge victorious in the First Punic War, yet end up crippled, humiliated, and setting the stage for an even deadlier revenge? Today we expose why Rome's first win against Carthage was actually its bloodiest nightmare. A victory so devastating that it nearly destroyed the Republic before Hannibal even set foot in Italy. Let's rewind to 264 BC. Rome controlled most of Italy, but they were still just another Mediterranean power. Across the sea lay Carthage, a commercial empire so wealthy it made Rome look like a collection of mud huts. Their ships dominated every trade route, their coffers overflowed with African gold, and their mercenary armies were the finest money could buy. The flashpoint? Sicily. Specifically, a group of Italian mercenaries called the Mamertines had seized the Sicilian city of Messana and were now crying for help. Carthage moved in to assist, really to expand their Sicilian holdings. Rome faced a choice: let Carthage control the gateway to Italy or intervene in their first major overseas conflict. Rome chose war. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. What started as a simple intervention would become a 23-year bloodbath that would drain Rome's treasury, slaughter over 100,000 of its citizens, and leave the Republic gasping for survival. And the most twisted part, they would win. Initially, things went exactly as Rome expected. Their legions crossed to Sicily and did what they did best. They conquered. Carthaginian forces were pushed back. Sicilian cities fell like dominoes, and Roman confidence soared to dangerous heights. But here's where Roman arrogance planted the seeds of their own destruction. The Senate looked at their string of land victories and made a catastrophic decision. If we can beat Carthage on land, why not at sea? Let's build a navy and crush them completely. This was like a mountain climber deciding to become a deep-sea diver overnight. Rome had virtually no naval tradition. Most Romans had never even seen a proper warship, let alone built one. Carthage, meanwhile, had ruled the waves for centuries. Their admirals learned seamanship from their grandfathers. Their shipwrights were master craftsmen. Their naval tactics were refined through generations of Mediterranean warfare. Did this stop Rome? Of course not. Roman pride was as vast as their ignorance. They captured a wrecked Carthaginian ship, reverse-engineered it, and announced they would build a fleet of 100 quinqueremes, massive 5-banked warships, in just 60 days. The hubris was breathtaking, but the real question is, was capturing a few Sicilian towns worth what was about to happen next? Rome's first naval encounter seemed to validate their confidence. At the Battle of Mylae in 260 BC, they actually defeated a Carthaginian fleet using a brilliant innovation: the corvus, a boarding bridge that turned sea battles into land battles. Roman newspapers, if they'd had them, would have proclaimed "Rome rules the waves." But Carthage was just getting started. What followed was a masterclass in why amateur sailors shouldn't challenge professionals. The Romans, drunk on their early success, decided to invade Africa itself to strike at the heart of Carthaginian power. They loaded 330 ships with 40,000 troops and set sail for glory. The result? Absolute catastrophe. At the Battle of Cape Bon in 255 BC, Carthaginian general Xanthippus, a Spartan mercenary, annihilated the Roman invasion force. Of 40,000 Romans, barely 2,000 survived. But wait, it gets worse. The rescue fleet carrying the pitiful remnants of Rome's African adventure sailed directly into a storm off Cape Hermaeum. In a single day, Rome lost 284 ships and 100,000 men to wind and waves. Let that sink in. Rome lost more soldiers to bad weather than most ancient battles killed in total. Entire Roman bloodlines were wiped out in one afternoon. The Mediterranean literally swallowed Rome's future. But Rome, stubborn as ever, refused to surrender, even if it meant bankrupting the entire republic. What desperate gamble did they try next? Here's where the true horror of Rome's victory reveals itself. Each fleet cost the equivalent of the entire annual Roman budget, and Rome kept losing them. Storm after storm, battle after battle, the Mediterranean became a graveyard of Roman ambition. After Cape Hermaeum, Rome built another fleet, lost it in a storm off Palinurus. Another 150 ships gone, they built another. The Carthaginians sank it at Drepana, along with 20,000 Roman lives. They built another storm claimed it. By 249 BC, Rome had built and lost 5 separate fleets. The public treasury was empty. Citizens were selling their jewelry to fund new ships. Roman farmers were abandoning their fields because every able-bodied man was either dead at sea or rowing in the latest doomed fleet. The social fabric of the Republic was unraveling. Widows outnumbered wives in many Roman neighborhoods. Orphans roamed the streets. The very senators who had voted for this war were now so broke they couldn't afford their own togas. And still, the war dragged on. Sicily remained divided. Carthage's African heartland was untouched. The only thing Rome had accomplished was the systematic destruction of its own manpower and wealth. Could Rome even afford another win like this? What followed were years of grinding and glorious warfare. Romans laying siege to Carthaginian strongholds in Sicily while their economy bled out at home. Carthaginian fleets raiding Roman coastal towns while their treasury slowly emptied, paying mercenaries. Neither side could deliver a knockout blow. Rome couldn't afford to lose more fleets, so they largely abandoned naval warfare, essentially conceding the seas to their enemies. Carthage couldn't risk their remaining resources on a full-scale invasion of Italy. The war had become a stalemate of mutual exhaustion. Roman generals earned their reputations besieging obscure Sicilian hilltop towns. Carthaginian admirals grew old blockading Roman supply ships. Entire generations grew up knowing nothing but this endless, pointless conflict. The turning point came not through Roman brilliance, but through sheer desperate persistence. In 242 BC, Rome scraped together enough private donations, yes, private donations because the state was bankrupt, to build one final fleet. This time, they got lucky. At the Battle of the Aegates Islands, Roman Admiral Gaius Lutatius Catulus caught a Carthaginian fleet laden with supplies for their Sicilian forces. The Romans, fighting with the desperation of men who knew this was their last chance, won a decisive victory. Carthage, also exhausted by decades of warfare, sued for peace. The war was finally won, but the real price was about to come due, and it would haunt Rome for generations. So what did Rome's victory actually accomplish? Let's tally the bill. The human cost. Conservative estimates put Roman dead at over 100,000, and that's just the military casualties. Disease, starvation, and social collapse killed thousands more civilians. Entire Roman family lines were extinct. A generation of young men lay at the bottom of the Mediterranean. The economic devastation. Rome's treasury was empty. The state debt was crushing. Citizens who had started the war as property owners were now destitute. The famous Roman roads fell into disrepair because there was no money for maintenance. Public works stopped. The very infrastructure that made Rome great was crumbling. The strategic failure. Yes, Rome technically controlled Sicily now, But Carthage remained powerful, wealthy, and utterly unconquered. Their African heartland was untouched. Their commercial empire remained intact. Rome had spent 23 years and sacrificed everything for what? A large island that cost more to garrison than it generated in taxes? This wasn't victory, it was mutual assured destruction, with Rome technically standing at the end. But here's the most devastating part. The peace treaty Rome negotiated was so lenient it guaranteed future war. Carthage paid a modest indemnity and evacuated Sicily. That's it. No crushing terms, no dismantling of their fleet, no restrictions on rebuilding. Rome had bled itself white for a peace treaty that left their enemies free to plot revenge. Did this victory make Rome stronger, or just angrier and poorer? The First Punic War didn't end conflict between Rome and Carthage. It made the next war inevitable. And here's why this victory was actually Rome's worst strategic blunder. Rome's trauma. The Republic emerged from the war psychologically scarred. They had faced annihilation and survived by the thinnest of margins. This created an almost paranoid determination to never again be caught unprepared. Rome began militarizing at an unprecedented pace, building larger armies, more ships, seeking control over every potential threat. Carthage's humiliation. Carthage had been forced to give up Sicily, their first major territorial loss in centuries. Worse, they had to pay Rome an indemnity while their own mercenaries rebelled over unpaid wages. The proud Carthaginian elite burned with shame and desire for revenge. The Barca family's rise. During the post-war chaos, a Carthaginian general named Hamilcar Barca, yes, Hannibal's father, emerged as a national hero. He had been the one competent Carthaginian commander in Sicily, and he blamed Carthage's defeat not on Roman superiority but on their own politicians' weakness. Hamilcar made his young son swear an oath of eternal hatred against Rome. That boy's name? Hannibal. The First Punic War had created the perfect conditions for an even more devastating conflict. Rome was traumatized, aggressive, and convinced of its own invincibility. Carthage was humiliated, angry, and plotting revenge under brilliant military leadership. The stage was set for the most famous invasion in ancient history. So who actually won the First Punic War? Certainly not the hundreds of thousands of dead Romans and Carthaginians, not the bankrupt Roman citizens or the humiliated Carthaginian merchants. The real winners were the arms dealers, the mercenary captains, and the politicians who turned catastrophic failure into personal glory. Roman generals who had lost entire fleets returned home to triumph parades, claiming credit for victories that had nearly destroyed the Republic. The Roman people, meanwhile, were told they had won a great victory. The devastating cost was hidden behind propaganda about Roman courage and destiny. The widows and orphans were told their sacrifices had made Rome great. But in the smoky taverns and crowded tenements where real Romans lived, a different story was told. Veterans would drink wine and mutter about the good men who had drowned for nothing. Mothers would clutch their remaining sons and pray the politicians wouldn't demand another victory like this one. The First Punic War revealed a dark truth about Roman society. They were willing to sacrifice everything, their wealth, their people, their future, rather than admit defeat. This wasn't strength. It was a dangerous addiction to pride that would nearly destroy them when Hannibal came calling. The tragedy of the First Punic War is that Rome learned all the wrong lessons. Instead of recognizing that their reckless naval expansion had been a costly mistake, they concluded that bigger fleets and more aggressive warfare were the answer. Instead of seeking genuine peace with Carthage, they began planning for the next conflict. Instead of rebuilding their domestic economy and caring for their war veterans, they expanded their military commitments across the Mediterranean. The First Punic War should have taught Rome humility. Instead, it taught them that victory, no matter how costly, justified any sacrifice. This mentality would lead them directly into the Second Punic War, where Hannibal would bring them to the very brink of extinction. Rome's first victory against Carthage wasn't a triumph, it was a warning. A warning that pride and stubborn persistence could be more dangerous than any enemy army. A warning that winning at any cost might mean losing everything that made victory worthwhile. Rome ignored that warning, and they would pay for it with rivers of blood when the son of Hamilcar Barca crossed the Alps with elephants and an army sworn to Rome's destruction. So what do you think? Was Rome foolish to keep fighting at sea against a superior naval power? Or was there no other choice once they had committed to war with Carthage? Could they have achieved a better outcome through diplomacy? Or was this grinding, costly victory the best they could hope for? More importantly, what does this teach us about the real cost of victory? Rome technically won the First Punic War, but did that victory make them stronger or weaker? Did it secure their future or guarantee more devastating conflicts? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're shocked by the true cost of Rome's first win against Carthage, smash that like button and subscribe for more untold stories from ancient history. Because next time, we're covering the aftermath of this hollow victory. How the losers of this war birthed a general who would bring Rome to its knees and nearly erase the eternal city from history forever. That's right, we're talking about Hannibal Barca and the Second Punic War, where Rome would finally pay the full price for their first victory against Carthage. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this story ends. Until then, remember, sometimes the most dangerous victories are the ones that feel like defeats. And sometimes the most devastating defeats are the ones celebrated as victories.